306 on 105.9 WMAL. My name is Dan Mandis for Vince Coglianese. Appreciate you listening. All eyes and ears on New Jersey, where in about, 90 minutes from now, President Trump is going to have what can only turn out to be yet another epic press conference. And it's going to be interesting because Kamala Harris, I don't know if you've seen this, but they come out with a press release and they are really trying to goad the former president. They're really trying to bait him. What they're trying to do with this press release that they released earlier today is anger Donald Trump before he goes and faces those reporters. The question is, will it work? Y'all ever see Mean Girls? You remember the burn book in Mean Girls? So the press conference that Donald Trump is having, the whole point is one of the things is to draw a contrast between Kamala Harris, who is hidden in plain sight and not answering any questions, and Donald Trump, who for the second Thursday in a row is going to meet a typically very hostile media, a very hostile press. So Kamala Harris and the Harris campaign, they issued this Mean Girls burn book type of press release baiting Donald Trump. You ready? Here's what it says. For planning purposes, reluctantly. Today, Donald Trump to ramble incoherently and spread dangerous lies in public, but at a different home. I kid you not, friends. This is an actual press release from Kamala Harris. Today at 4:30 p.m., Donald J. Trump, loser of the 2020 election by 7 million votes, will hold another public meltdown in Bedminster, New Jersey. Venue, not a battleground state. Preview, not so fresh off the NABJ, Florida, and Twitter glitches. Donald Trump intends to deliver another self-obsessed rant full of his own personal grievances to distract from his toxic Project 2025 agenda, unpopular running mate, and increasing detachment from the reality of the voters who will decide this election. These remarks will not be artificial intelligence, but they certainly will lack intelligence. Banning abortion, raising costs on families, confusing basic facts, cutting Social Security and Medicare, blocking border security, and being publicly unstable, unfit, and unwell will not help his struggling campaign for president. Tune in for the same old thing. That is a Kamala Harris fifth grade style press release trying to bait or goad or irritate or anger Donald Trump before he goes in front of a very hostile press. Now, I will tell you that I read that and I thought, how juvenile do you sound? But I do understand that Donald Trump also has a certain style. But to me, this is an official press release from Kamala Harris. And by the way, I will also say it's awfully brave of the vice president. It's awfully brave of the vice president to have this kind of a press release when she herself refuses to answer questions. She won't even answer questions about answering questions. Meantime, Donald Trump, he is out there pretty much everywhere, including today at 4:30, answering any questions that the media might have. Doesn't matter how dumb the questions may be. Doesn't matter how he has probably answered the same question 50,000 times. Oh, and by the way, in this press release from Kamala Harris, it's full of lies itself. He has disavowed having anything to do with this Project 2025. They can call J.D. Vance unpopular, but I will tell you, she's certainly one to talk with the absolute meltdown of her running mate, Tim Walz. Increasing detachment from the reality of the voters who will decide this election. I would remind Kamala Harris that she and Trump are very close to tied. depending on what we're talking about. Voters, all Americans, battleground states, whatever. But I do find all of this interesting. In this, and you probably, when I was reading this too, you probably thought the same thing. Raising costs on families. Really, Kamala? Who has raised costs on the families of America? Who? You and Joe Biden or Donald Trump? Because I would remind the vice president that it was she and Joe Biden who led us down this merry path of 9.3% inflation and rising costs on literally everything. So she's got a lot of nerve. Cutting Social Security and Medicare. Donald Trump has literally said 1,000 times he is not going to cut Social Security and Medicare. And what he's actually said now is no taxes on Social Security. Blocking border security. Clearly, Kamala Harris has absolutely no intention of protecting the border if she gets into office. And Donald Trump was not the one that blocked border security. That clearly was Joe Biden and his border czar, Kamala Harris. Being publicly unstable. Wow. It's almost like she wrote this in talking about Joe Biden and not Donald Trump. Because of the two, Joe Biden and Donald Trump, who has been more unstable in public? Clearly, that's going to be Joe Biden. She talks about how Donald Trump is, the more that I'm reading this, the more that I'm taking it in, the more I'm realizing this entire paragraph really could apply much more to Joe Biden than Donald Trump. She says Donald Trump unfit and unwell. I don't know about that, Kamala, because we spent 3.5 years watching your president clearly unfit, clearly unwell, clearly publicly unstable, and you were the one that covered that up. You were the one that covered it up, and you were the one that has no interest in answering any questions about that cover-up. But that is certainly, you look at the polling, I would say to Kamala Harris, and I hope that Donald Trump says this today. If I'm Donald Trump, I say, in fact, what I would do if I were Trump, I would take that press release and I would read that line. And then just as I'm doing, I would take it line by line and I would say exactly how all of those sentences and all of those references apply far more fittingly to Joe Biden and Kamala Harris than his campaign or him as president or a guy running for president, especially the line about being publicly unstable, unfit, and unwell, because that clearly, again, applies to Joe Biden. So this fifth grade Mean Girls burn book kind of press release from Kamala Harris really is rather fitting. But you know what Kamala Harris cannot do? She can't do this.
I'm announcing today that under my leadership, the United States will commit to the ambitious goal of slashing energy and electricity prices by half, at least half. Kamala has declared that tackling inflation will be a day one priority. Think of it, for her, but day one for Kamala was 3.5 years ago. But she wants to talk for the future about these fantasies, but really what she needs to explain is the present suffering that she's caused along with Joe Biden. When Kamala lays out her fake economic plan this week, probably will be a copy of my plan because basically that's what she does. Does anyone here feel richer under Kamala Harris than Crooked Joe? Under Kamala Harris and Crooked Joe Biden, the American real incomes are down by over $2,000 a year. Credit card debt has exploded, and it's exploded to the highest it's ever been, and the cost of a typical monthly mortgage has tripled. But soon we are going to fix every single problem Kamala Harris and Joe Biden have created, and we are going to save our country. We are going to save America. We're going to save America.
That's, Donald Trump in North Carolina. And so the point that I'm making is that Kamala Harris can't go out on a stage and talk about policy. Kamala Harris cannot answer the statements that Donald Trump made on stage in that montage that I put together regarding the economy. And he came out, Donald Trump did, with a very specific plan, a very specific goal. And that is that he is going to slash energy costs by half for the American people. He also reiterated that he's not going to tax tips or Social Security. And so I guess what I would like to see from Donald Trump later this afternoon at 4:30, we're going to do our best to carry it here on WMAL Live, is that she's not able to answer any of these questions, and he has got to really drive that point home. You know, one of the things that some of these media outlets like CNN, they're focused on, they are obsessed over Donald Trump perpetually calling Kamala Harris unintelligent, lacking intelligence, whatever. Now, here's what I would say to that, and some of my conservative friends might take some issue with what I'm about to say. I don't believe that Kamala Harris, and hear me out, I don't necessarily believe that Kamala Harris is lacking on intelligence. It's just, how do you apply or define the word intelligent? I mean, she graduated college and law school. She was an attorney, of course. She was a district attorney. She was an attorney general. She was a senator, and she was a vice president. So she obviously has some intelligence. But do you know that the people that I know who are the most educated are the dumbest people in the world? Because they got no street smarts. And some of the smartest people I know are lacking in a formal education, but they're smart. They've got some street smarts. They've got some intuition. They've got some common sense. So here's the thing about Kamala Harris. She may have some book smart intelligence. She may have, degrees and positions, and, she's had some, what's the right word to say? Accomplishments, I guess, and the fact that she was elected as a DA and a vice president, of course, and an attorney general. But she's made some very unintelligent decisions. And I think that's why Donald Trump is calling her unintelligent. You can have all the degrees, you can have the positions, but that doesn't necessarily make you smart. That doesn't necessarily make you intelligent. Again, I think she's intelligent in the fact that she was able to get her degrees and get elected, but when it came down to it, when it came right down to it, did Kamala Harris make smart decisions when she was, and as she still is, vice president? I don't believe that she did. It's been 3 years, friends, 3 years since the disastrous pullout of Afghanistan. She has proudly said that she was in the room when Joe Biden made the decision to pull out in the disastrous way that he did. Was that an intelligent decision? No, of course not. And she proudly says that she was in the room when he made that decision. For the last 3.5 years, the border has been wide open. Despite what she says, lying to the American people. She, Alejandro Mayorkas, Joe Biden, and the rest of the liars on the left telling us that the border was secure and the border was closed, when it clearly was not. So is it an intelligent decision to leave the border wide open? Of course it wasn't. So while you could argue that, okay, so Kamala Harris, she has some intelligence in the fact that she was able to get degrees and get elected. Again, when it came right down to policy, she did horribly. She and Joe Biden did horribly. So on the one hand, you've got the media obsessing over and I'm going to air quote this, the insults that Donald Trump is hurling at Kamala Harris. But I would just refer the media, the hand-wringing media, to this press release where Kamala Harris not only insults Donald Trump, insults his intelligence, but also lies about his policy. Now, you know what would be nice? We can talk all we want right now about Kamala Harris's policy. We could. The problem is we don't know what her policy is. That's another thing that Donald Trump needs to do. He needs to talk about the fact that we know nothing about Kamala Harris's policy. We know nothing about where she stands on anything except for the policy that she has stolen from Donald Trump, i.e. no tax on tips. Oh, and by the way, she also came out, I can't remember if this came out before we were off the air or not, but she is also now saying that how she is going to battle the cost of things rising, the cost of groceries and so on rising, is she's going to place some sort of an artificial cap on groceries. And she's going to go after the stores and the grocers and all that are, she says, price gouging the American people by somehow having fixed prices. You know, price limits. The prices of goods cannot go above a certain price. I don't know how you do that. I mean, isn't that literally the antithesis of capitalism? That's number one. And number two, by doing so, what she's actually trying to do, by blaming the corporations and the grocery stores and all this for the high prices, by blaming them and saying that she's going to cap those prices, she's actually trying to distract from what the Biden administration did to cause those prices to rise in the first place. Yes, friends, we have a lot to talk about on this Thursday. We are really looking forward to what Donald Trump has to say later today at roughly 4:30 when we cover his press conference live from New Jersey right here on WMAL. 328 on WMAL. My name is Dan Mandis in for Vince Coglianese. By the way, you can find out more about me. Follow me on Twitter, X if you would, at Dan Mandis Show. I love this headline. GOP voter registration 4 times higher than Democrats in Pennsylvania. One of the bigger stories that we spoke a little bit about yesterday. Going to go into some detail with one of the guys that made that happen. Scott Presler is going to join us. He's one of my favorites, founder of Early Vote Action. Again, big success in registering GOP voters in Pennsylvania. That is a very big story. Going to get the inside details on exactly how they did it in this very important battleground state of Pennsylvania. Details straight ahead on WMAL. .335 on WMAL. My name is Dan Mandis in for Vince Coglianese. Thank you very much for joining us. We'll be covering Donald Trump's press conference from New Jersey live coming up at 4:30 here on the Vince Coglianese Show. And again, Dan in for Vince. Joining us, Scott Presler. And Scott, one of those guys that likes to get out the vote, founder of Early Vote Action. Scott, you're in the news this week. Big success in registering GOP voters in Pennsylvania. And I got to ask you, first of all, the headline from a couple of different outlets. This is from Newsweek. GOP voter registration 4 times higher than Democrats in Pennsylvania. Let's talk about how you were able to facilitate more registrations of Republicans than Democrats in Pennsylvania.
Yes, well, thank you for having me back. But I think part of the reason why this story is so big is because in the last 3 weeks, a lot has happened. You know, Joe Biden was pushed aside undemocratically. Kamala is the presumptive nominee, and she chose her presumptive vice presidential candidate. And so now you would think would be the quote-unquote honeymoon phase, that you would see all of this quote-unquote momentum, all of this energy for Democrats. And we're just not seeing it on the ground, nor are we seeing it reflected in the data. And what I mean by that is all 3 weeks I've been tracking the data constantly, and Republicans are maintaining a lead statewide across all 67 counties. Now, granted, the Democrats have seen a bump in some of the Philadelphia collar counties, Montgomery, Chester, Delaware, all of the places that you would assume Democrats would get a bump. But here's the interesting thing. So just a couple weeks ago, we flipped Bucks County from blue to red. Now, 4 years ago, the Democrats had an advantage of 15,000 more registered Democrats than Republicans. We now have a plurality of registered Republicans in that county. Now, here's the thing. Despite the quote-unquote Kamala bump in all the Philly collar counties, Bucks County has been the one county outside of Philadelphia that continues to trend to the right. And the last point that I'll make is we are meeting people where they are. We're going to farmers markets. We're going to meet frat brothers at the college universities. We're going to gun shows, and we're going to all of these fairs that are happening. We'll be at the Washington County Fair this week. We were just at Wayne. We were at Butler. And so we're meeting voters where they are, and I think we're seeing those translated into the voter registration data.
But it's really interesting because part of this story is that you are speaking to the 90,000 Amish folks in Pennsylvania. And so I do find it interesting because this is typically for Republicans. We have been, and I know this has been a passion of yours for a long time, Scott. We've been beaten at the ground game for a long time. What I like about what you're doing is you're trying to beat the Democrats at their own game, and I love that. When you approach these folks and you ask them, either why are you not registered? I don't know if also part of this conversation is why have you not voted in the last, couple of elections? But why were people either not registered to vote or inactive?
Well, it's a couple things. Look, I'm a direct person. I'm not going to beat around the bush. When I'm at a gun show, I directly say to voters, 30% of Pennsylvania hunters are not registered to vote. If every hunter, if every gun enthusiast in Pennsylvania votes, we win. Donald Trump is elected. He's president. And when I go to farmers markets and I visit with the Amish, I say directly to them, if the Amish community collectively voted, your community could save Western civilization. You would help us win Pennsylvania. You would win the White House, and you would help provide for peace globally, stopping wars, ending wars. And when I have that conversation with the Amish, and especially, let's be real, Governor Josh Shapiro, Democrat, has been waging a war on raw milk and religious freedom and school choice and coerced vaccinations. Those are all things the Amish care about. Now, when I'm talking to just normal average voters, I registered a woman born in 1965, and she goes, Scott, I've never voted. I'm registering and I'm voting this year because I can't afford anything. I go to the supermarket. I can't afford gas. I can't afford my mortgage. People are really suffering. They are struggling to get by economically. And I think that is going to be a big reason why we have people come out and vote for Donald Trump this November, is because they want to be able to afford things again.
It is interesting because when you look at Pennsylvania, 538 came out. I'm sure you know this. 538 came out, Nate Silver, and he basically said that this election is going to run through Pennsylvania. Then when you look at Pennsylvania, you look at, you have your counties that are clearly going to be blue, and then you have your counties that are clearly going to be red. You have to focus, obviously, you know this, you basically just said this, you have to focus on those counties where it could go either way. How easy is it to identify those counties that could go either way? I guess you'd call them, what do you call them, like purple counties, and how do you make sure that they go red? It's got to be just a massive ground game. Are you fighting the Democrats for the same votes? Are you knocking on some doors and then you see them right behind you?
Well, this is about knowing your history. And here's what I know. 2016, Donald Trump won Erie County. He won the state. 2020, Joe Biden won Erie County. He won the state. This election is going to come down to, listen, if we win 25% of Philly, it's done. Donald Trump wins. If we win 40% of Allegheny County, it's done. Donald Trump wins. This is about bumping up our margins in Bucks County, in Lehigh, in Northampton, in Erie. We're 1,100 voters away from flipping Center County, where Penn State University is. We're 1,000 voters away from flipping Luzerne County, where Donald Trump is going to be this weekend, where I am driving right now to Wilkes-Barre to make sure that we are registering every single Trump rally goer. And this is important because 13% of Trump rally goers are not registered to vote. So I literally am finding these target demographic audiences, getting them registered and mobilizing them. Now, I will tell you, the Democrats have been at some of these county fairs that we're doing. But I'll tell you, That respectfully, they don't have our passion. They don't have our energy. They aren't standing at their tables. They aren't engaging with everybody like we do. When we do a fair or festival, we register hundreds of new Republican voters. And I'm not seeing the level of activism from the Democrats, but don't take that as we're going to win this election. I need everybody to go to earlyvoteaction.com. That's early, like you're early to something, vote, V-O-T-E, action.com. I have hired a state director for Pennsylvania, and I have 12 staff across Pennsylvania. If you want me to be able to hire more people and more boots on the ground, direct face-to-face voter contact, please, I ask for your financial support at earlyvoteaction.com, and 100% of your support will go to hiring more people so we can win Pennsylvania.
Scott Presler, founder of Early Vote Action. So, Scott, I know that you know because, one, I've interviewed you before about a number of different things, and I know that clearly you're very passionate, and we can hear that. One of the big debates between Republicans and conservatives is this notion of, well, I want to vote on Election Day versus, I'm just going to be honest, I'm pretty sure I know where you stand on this, but, I believe that we do need to embrace early voting, do whatever we need to do, just like the Democrats are doing, ballot harvesting, everything within the law. But if we need to go out and early vote by mail, whatever it is that we need to do to match what the Democrats are doing, that's what we need to do. We need to evolve, and we need to do whatever it takes to win.
Listen, my website is earlyvoteaction.com.
Yes,
I endorse early voting. And I was at the Wayne County Fair. A trucker is there. We get him registered. He's a fan of mine. And I was like, hey, are you registered to vote? And he's like, yeah. And we were telling him about early voting, and he left after, a pleasant discussion, and he came back and he goes, you know what? I might be driving on Election Day. Let me fill out a mail-in ballot request form. And it made my day, because there are 80,000 truckers in Pennsylvania. And if you're listening on a big rig right now, an 18-wheeler, please, I'm asking you especially, if you're a pilot, a firefighter, a police officer, if you are in the service industry, that you're serving us, the American people, and you're working a long 12-hour shift, well, the last thing that you need to do is wait several hours in line to vote, or worry about crossing the bridge from New York to go over to the Poconos to Monroe County, because we got so many people that live in PA but work in New York. Please, lock in your vote early. I need your vote for Donald Trump. I need your vote to help save our country. And if you're one of those people that work for us, I ask you to think about either doing a mail-in ballot or vote early in person. Early voting is 50 days in Pennsylvania. You have every opportunity in the world to vote for Donald Trump and lock in that vote.
Well, it looks like, clearly you've had some success in Pennsylvania. Congratulations. Let me ask you this. Are the Republicans in other states, like perhaps in, Michigan, Arizona, Nevada, Georgia, are they paying attention to your success and what you're doing?
We have beautiful grassroots volunteers in all 50 states. And in fact, people can download the Early Vote Action application. It's on iPhone and Android. If you want to make phone calls, send text messages, write postcards into some of these swing states. But I'll tell you, we are kicking booty in Arizona, where I think they have like 250,000 more registered Republicans than Democrats right now. Nevada, we're like 40,000 voters away from flipping that state. We're also kicking behind peacefully in Georgia, registering a lot of voters. The reason why I'm so intent and focused on Pennsylvania is because there kind of has been a little void of voter registration efforts, and I'm there to buttress those efforts, make sure that we are prepared to win this November, because again, Pennsylvania wins the entire ball game, and people can support me at earlyvoteaction.com.
Scott, I want to zoom out a little bit, and I want to zero in on something you said earlier, where you were talking about the polls, and you intimated that you're not really buying the polls. I'm going to tell you that I don't necessarily buy them either, because I think that part of what the media is doing, they're part of the Democrat machine. And so I understand that there's 1,000 polls, and they're all, sort of going in the same direction. And I do understand that. But I also do believe that part of this machine is the media, polling, social media minus X and so forth. And so what I love about what you're doing is that you are getting the word out that, don't necessarily believe the polls, because I think that's a part of, frankly, voter suppression, where the Democrats in their machine, they're trying to get Republicans to the point where they're just, depressed and they don't want to come out and vote.
Well, let's revisit history for a moment. 2016, everybody said that Hillary Clinton had a 96% chance of winning.
Yep.
And that the blue wall was impossible. Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, right? Now, let's also look at the data for a second. In 2016, there were 916,000 more registered Democrats than Republicans, and Donald Trump triumphed, winning Pennsylvania. The polls were baloney, and despite almost 1 million more Ds than ours, we won. Now, let's fast forward to 2024. There are only 357,000 more registered Ds than ours. We are in a much better place than we were 8 years ago. We have a better opportunity than ever to win Pennsylvania. Now, that doesn't mean we can rest. That doesn't mean to not work as hard as we did 8 years ago, but it means that we're in a really good place. We have organizations like mine. We have funding coming in. We are electrified, and quite frankly, I'm hearing from a lot of people that weren't going to vote that after the assassination attempt on Donald Trump's life in Butler County, Pennsylvania, that they are coming out to vote for him. And I'm inspired by the enthusiasm that I'm seeing on the ground for the Republican Party.
All right, Scott Presler, give us your website one more time. I love your passion. I love your enthusiasm. It is infectious, and I hope that people donate to your cause. And again, founder of Early Vote Action. Is it earlyvoteaction.com?
Yes, it's earlyvoteaction.com. Please finance my ability to hire more staff across Pennsylvania, and I want you to please sign up to volunteer. And you can also slide into my DMs in the most wholesome of manner at Scott Presler, SCOTTPRES1SLER on X, and I look forward to working with all of y'all.
All right, Scott, thank you very much, and good luck, and thank you for what you're doing. It is 3:55 on WMAL. My name is Dan Mandis, in for Vince Coglianese. So Kamala Harris is out there with Joe Biden. Some people are trying to figure out, why exactly is Kamala Harris out there with the president? Because she's trying to distance herself from Joe Biden and his policies, yet bizarrely enough, at the same time, talk about how they were partners in everything that has been happening for the last 3.5 years. But Biden said this just a couple of hours ago about Donald Trump.
Mr. Trump says he wants to make America affordable again. Your response? So you ought to get a job.
I don't know if you heard that, but that is a very feeble-sounding Joe Biden saying, I think he needs to get a job.
Mr. Trump says he wants to make America affordable again. Your response? So you ought to get a job.
Do you know what's ironic about that statement? Isn't it Joe Biden that needs to get a job because he's going to be out of a job in a couple of months? I don't know. I just thought that was kind of funny that he said that. Maybe it was just me. Peter Doocy asked Joe Biden about Kamala Harris trying to distance herself from Joe Biden, and Biden kind of kept her in sort of the Biden-Harris box. Listen to this.
How much does it bother you that Vice President Harris might soon, for political reasons, start to distance herself from your economic?
She's not going to.
You don't think she's going to? Mr. President?
You heard Biden say she's not going to. I hate to tell you, Joe, but that's what people are saying, that she is going to distance herself from you and your economic disaster. Now, I don't know how she does that, but that is what she is going to try to do at some point. I do understand, and I played audio from Donald Trump earlier where he was talking about Kamala Harris, trying to talk about what she's going to do in the future as far as the economy goes. Well, that's a little hard when she really is tied like an anchor to Joe Biden and what has happened the past 3.5 years. We are finding out more about what Kamala wants to do. Steve Moore, co-founder of the Committee to Unleash Prosperity and founder of Club for Growth, he's going to be with us after the news at 4 to talk to us about what he thinks about Kamala Harris's plans. It's all straight ahead on WMAL.